You're listening to the Homeownership podcast by Momentum Realty, real estate talk for buying, selling, and owning property.
Hey guys, Sean Patrick Maloney here, broker owner of Momentum Realty, located in Hanover, Massachusetts. Welcome to episode 48, Buying a Home in 2020. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Maloney. Thanks for joining me this week. I want to talk to you about the subject of buying a home, and specifically in the year 2020. We came out of a very strong marketplace in 2019, and we're moving into 2020, and people are wondering what it's going to be like, where are they going? While no one knows, I'm going to give you a little bit of my projections of what I think is going to happen with the marketplace, and how to survive it, and how to thrive within that marketplace. You got to remember, no matter where a market goes, up, down, left, or right, there's always someone buying and selling property, and there's always somebody buying property at a great rate, and there's always someone selling a property at a great rate. You just need to know where to look, how to look, when to look, why to look, and all those types of things. So we're going to go over all those in this podcast today. First, let's talk about rates. Rates are at historic lows, and I think they're going to continue to stay here. It's hard to ever project, especially in an election year and a few other different things going on within the economy. But ultimately, it seems like rates are low and they're here to stay. And a lot of people are talking about them possibly even going down a tick or two more, which would be very interesting. At the end of the day, low rates means cheap money. Cheap money means that people are ultimately able to afford more home. The one negative that's never looked at on this, but it's a positive for sellers, is that when rates are low, buyers are able to spend more money, which means sellers are able to charge more money, because at the end of the day, we can all pay what we can afford. So as our rates go down and our affordability goes up, so doesn't the fact that we are able to spend more money. So you'll see an overall climb in the overall housing prices, which will still have a powerful market, but it's going to hit a point where we are getting to a really high number on properties, so it's going to slow some people down. The problem with this is a lot of times people speculate of when the end is near or where it's going to go down. And the reality is a lot of times they're renting and they're staying in a place where they're losing all their money in order to save from spending money now. So this is going to be an important year, more important than ever, to really do the long-term math out on what it's costing you to be where you are and if the time to move is now. Because relying on the fact that the market's going to go down, for a lot of people who thought it was going to go down last year, they lost out. Now for people who think it's going to go down this year, they're going to lose out as well, because we have low inventory, which means that in the supply-demand charts, ultimately demand is high, supply is low, which, as you remember, if you remember in school, when you have high demand, low supply, it means that prices are going to continue to rise. One thing that I think a lot of people aren't taking into effect when they look at housing and whether it'll go up and down is the amount of people in the planet. The planet is an ever-growing population, and we have the baby boomer generation just about to get out of housing when it comes to big houses and want to move more towards your single-level ranches and things. But then we also have Generation X as well as millennials all coming into the housing marketplaces. Those three different groups represent a massive amount of people. So no matter what the economy does, win, lose, or draw, we're still going to need to find people housing. So I don't see any sort of lack of demand in the upcoming months. The other thing is supply. So depending on where you're located in the country, here in Massachusetts, where I am, over by the coast, there's really not much more land. So when it comes to supply, it's not like someone can just turn an on switch on and just flip in a new couple hundred units like we need. It's a very slow process, because maybe it's a tear down, rebuild house. That doesn't add a new unit, that just fixes a unit. Or maybe you have a house lot where they take it and they cut it into two lots that adds one unit. So when you're just adding onesie twosies here and there, it really doesn't add up big. When I was young and there was a lot of land down here, you used to see developments going 20, 30, 40 houses, multiple developments going at the same time. That day and age is gone. So now we're in more of a almost like a trader's market, where we're taking one property and we're selling it to move to another property, but we're really not going into brand new housing as often, which means that eventually, as you add new people and you just switching properties back and forth, it's similar to when you play musical chairs. There's not going to be a chair for somebody. So ultimately what that means is more people are going to become renters that aren't able to afford to buy, and people who are willing to pay the higher costs are going to get the housing. So I'm always skeptical when people say that the market's going to go down in the future. I think if you can afford to buy now, you should buy now, because in the future you don't know that you'll be able to afford to buy. And with the supply and demand the way it is, it'd be a shame to figure that you could have bought a few years ago, but you'll never get that opportunity again because of the fact that maybe the rates rose, or maybe the house prices rose so much that they're outside of your marketplace. So overall, 2020, in my opinion, is going to be a seller's market. So let's talk a little bit about a seller's market and what it is, and then how to deal with it. So first off, a seller's market. A lot of people always hear the term seller or buyer's market. A seller's market or buyer's market indicates that it's in that person's best interest as far as the market overall statistically. So as a seller's market, it means that buyers are going to have to kind of do what the seller demands of them as far as pricing and maybe negotiation of terms. It means there's not as many sellers as there are buyers out there, so it means those sellers are able to more vet the buyers. Whereas in a buyer's market, you're a lot more able to define the terms as well as make lower than asking price offers. In a really heated seller's market like we're in currently, you see most of the homes are selling within 7 to 14 days of coming on the marketplace, which means they're selling at full price, if not above, as well as at full terms, if not better terms, to the seller. Whereas when they're sitting 30 to 60 days, maybe even 90 days, that's when the buyers are starting to be able to whittle down the price on the seller and other things when it comes to overall the terms. But right now, like I said, the reality is the marketplace is very, very, very tight. There's very low inventory in most towns, and the inventory that sits on the market currently is either needing too much work for people or it's overpriced. There's really no excuse. If your house hasn't sold recently and it's on the market and you're listening to this and it's somewhere in the month of January, you really need to talk about either changing agents, changing prices, or changing strategy, because there is something seriously wrong if you're not sold right now. The market is on fire and everybody's selling really quickly. So let's talk about, as a buyer, what you can do in a seller's market to help your offer stand out. So a lot of people always think top price is everything. While top price is important and getting paid the most money is on most sellers' minds, there are other terms and things that go into play. One of the biggest ones is the deadlines and dates. So if you have a person who has a job somewhere else in the future, or maybe they have kids in school, or a lot of the different options where there's deadlines, a lot of times the difference of more money versus the difference of being able to stay in the home until the date they want. So instead of saying the closing date is now in March, you might say, okay, the closing date will be in June, and that allows their children to finish school or allows them to finish work at their current place before moving on to the next one. That's somewhere where you can gain a lot of power, because ultimately to figure out how to sell your home, temporarily rent, and then move is actually really expensive. So even if you offered $5 or $10 grand more, what was it going to cost them to temporarily house themselves and move twice? You're going to find that it's not as expensive to take that price break as it was to move yourself a couple times and to be in the in-between. The other thing is the power of the mind and knowing where you're going to be. It's really powerful for a lot of sellers. It's really up in the air when you're going to go to a rental in between. So remember, as a buyer, when you're working, if you're working with an agent, you want your agent to reach out to the seller. If you're not working with an agent, which I don't recommend, you want to reach out to the sellers and you want to find out what are the best terms for them dates-wise. Next thing down that some people are doing, really, it's a risky one, but you can make the choice, is dropping some of the contingencies. We have different contingencies, and a contingency, if you don't know what it is, it's a protectionary clause that allows you to back out from an offer based on your terms that you set forth, such as a home inspection contingency, mortgage contingency, appraisal contingency, radon contingency. There are lots of them. So in a very competitive marketplace, it's very interesting to me people will do something such as a radon contingency. Now, I'm not telling you not to do one, but let's talk about it and let's figure it out real quick. So commonly people do a radon contingency, and then when they have a radon issue, they ask to have it fixed by the seller. I get it. It saves you some money, make sure your family's safe, all these different things. I'm not saying not to have a radon test, but what if you were to buy the property without a radon contingency and then do the radon test after and have it fixed? I've never seen a system personally go over $2,500. So by increasing your offer by $2,500 or removing the radon test removal removes stress from the seller that you can walk away if you don't buy it. Whereas you're going to have to pay for the radon thing, if it goes wrong in the future. Now, like I said, I'm not telling you shouldn't do a radon contingency, but do you think a contingency over something that usually ranges between $1,000 and $2,000 is worth your effort? Now, you want to look at your local marketplace and talk with someone professional in the radon mitigation field, but most commonly, you're best to just go ahead, skip the radon test then and test it right when you get the home, and then just pay out of pocket for a radon mitigation system. It's really not that big of a deal. Another one that we see commonly is home inspections. Home inspections is something that I would never tell you not to do, but a lot of times I've seen people take no home inspection and really take the offer basically out from underneath other people. The reason being is when you have no home inspection contingency, it tells the seller that you're not going to beat them up further on the pricing or on fixing up the property. Not exactly for everybody. If you're going to do it, I would suggest to make sure before you put in an offer, you have a contractor go out to the home with you and look the home over. That way there you almost have a home inspection, or bring in someone else that's knowledgeable about housing and electrical and all those types of things and have them look at it before you put in the offer. Or if you put in an offer on something that needs work, then maybe you don't skip that contingency. But again, not recommended, but also a very powerful way to add a lot of pushing power to that offer compared to others. The appraisal contingency is one that says the property must appraise at or above purchase price. What that means is the person that's going to do the valuation for the bank or the valuation for the loan, when they look at the property, if you're contingent upon the appraisal, it means that it must appraise at that price, or you have the right to negotiation, or you have the right to not buy the home. Sometimes you'll see people, especially heavy cash buyers, where they're going to have the money to cover the difference in between, drop that appraisal contingency, because in an upward trending marketplace, dead honest, a lot of times the appraisals are low because they can only take comps that have actually sold and appraise it based on that. So looking at the current marketplace in an appreciating market, a lot of times it doesn't justify the current prices. While this isn't for everybody, it is another way to build a little bit of power. You can never drop your mortgage contingency if you need a mortgage, because that's something that you actually have to have in there for the bank. So that's not one you're going to be taking out. But if you are a cash buyer, you may be able to go in without that contingency as well. There's some other contingencies like pest inspections and things. The same thing applies for those. Like I said before, if you have somebody that's a professional, they know what they're doing, they come out before you make an offer, you might feel a little more comfortable with it. But I can't advise you to drop it. I can say that the least amount of contingencies you have, the more likelihood of your offer getting accepted. Some other things you can do to make your offer stand out. One would be to write a letter. This has become more common in the more recent years, to take a few photos, maybe one of your family, maybe one of yourself, maybe one of your pets, and to put them into a letter. Write up a little bit about how you like their home, what you like about the home, and why you think the home would be great for you. Tell them a little bit about who you are, and just add a little personality, because at the end of the day, we're just putting numbers and words on paper, whereas when we put these letters together and photos together, it can make a person see like, wow, I'm similar to this person. I like them. I would like them to have my house. They'll really care about it. So that's a really good way to do it on an emotional level. Again, not adding more money, but actually getting a connection with that seller. Another thing you can do is get a good pre-qualification and put more money down. So a lot of times people are very hesitant to put money down, especially when it comes to the deposits. You really want to be at 5% on the PNS if you can, if at all possible. I know some people are buying at 3-5 down, but you want to put the best foot forward. It's strange to me, so many people, they kind of argue over putting a deposit down, and they're like, well, what if I lose it? Well, the same what if you lose it comment is exactly why the seller fears you. They fear, why are you going to walk away? Like, what if you have your proper contingencies in place, you don't get your mortgage, you get your deposit back. If you have a bad home inspection, you get your deposit back. If you have radon come up and you have a radon contingency, you get your deposit back if you leave. Your deposit isn't as much risk other than if you just simply walk away from the property, if you just decide you don't want it. Now, mind you, there are things that happen in life that do change circumstances, but 99 times out of 100, the person ends up wanting to close with the house, so taking that deposit back really doesn't make much sense to not put a good deposit out. And then getting that better pre-qualification letter, because, you might qualify for an FHA loan, which you might end up wanting to use, but the reality is you should have in your back pocket a conventional loan, because if you're competing and the person sees an FHA or a VA loan and you don't qualify for the other loan, they're worried that maybe at the appraisal for the VA or the FHA that there's going to be issues and that you're not going to be able to move forward because that's the only loan option you have. By just simply showing them that you have other loan options, that may open up the doors a little bit to them taking you in as a buyer. Also, make sure when you're working with a lender that you choose one who you can get in touch with. A lot of people shop rate, which yes, rate's super important, but you also want to make sure you find somebody that cares, somebody that's available, somebody that when you put in an offer and you call them, they're willing to make a phone call to that seller's agent to verify the information that you provided on that pre-approval and to say this person is good and outstanding and they're going to make it happen. Last but not least, another thing you can do on the offer is do a faster P&S. So a lot of people want to take the full 10 days for home inspection. I want to say definitely reach out to the home inspector first and make sure they can do it, but a lot of times they can get it done as fast as that weekend, maybe even quicker. So the faster you're in the P&S, the more secure they are, the more they have your deposit, the more that they feel like the deal is surefire going to happen. When you move dates forward, though, you want to check in with the mortgage professional, the inspector, as well as the attorney, just to make sure everybody can keep those dates up that you're trying for. But again, the seller is the one who you want to listen to, especially in a seller's market, and talk with and find out what is their best terms and how do you best meet their needs to make sure that that home becomes your home. I just want to take one more minute here of your time to talk a little bit about selling and buying a home in a marketplace like this. We kind of end up in the old standoff where one person says, show me yours, I'll show you mine type of situation, where a lot of people, they want to go out shopping, but they don't want to put the house on the market because they're scared for what if they don't find a house that they're going to buy and they're in between. Well, the reality is that tentativeness, that scared feeling that you have makes the sellers scared of you because you're a buyer. Now you need to sell a property to buy my property, but yet you're not willing to put your property up before you lock my property down. It doesn't give them the feeling of confidence that they need in order to lock in a contract with you. What you need to do is start selling right away. You may have to say, I'm selling my house, but I have a suitable housing clause. But you, the seller of the home, the person who owns a home, needs to be listed before you go out trying to buy. And sometimes it means sell, rent, own, which you get a temporary housing situation. Other times it means sell and then move to another. Or for some people, if you can possibly buy and still own your old home at the same time, maybe it means buy and then sell. But when you put in a home sale contingency, it really can throw a stick in the mud when it comes to the overall equation of getting along and getting that offer accepted. So my advice really is start selling right away. And then if you are going to put an offer in with a home sale contingency, make sure that you include within it the MLS ID number, the property, the price, and then show all the comps. And when you are selling your home on a home sale contingency and you are working to buy a home, this is my absolute pet peeve. You cannot maximize the cost of your home. You need to sell your home at a slightly discounted budget. To take somebody and ask them to take you in as a buyer with a home sale contingency and then to think that you're going to put your price as high as possible, it just shows them that you're not ready to buy their home and that there's a good chance that you're not going to end up selling. What you want to do is put it at a price that's going to attract the most buyers, get you under agreement right away, and get you freed up of that home sale contingency. Buying a home with a home sale contingency can happen. It's becoming less and less common the more we move into the seller's market. So make sure to put your place in order so that you're ready to sell it and list it right away before you make the offer. Even if you list it the same day as you make the offer, it's really important that you show that you're putting your best foot forward. I think it's going to be a great year to buy and sell in 2020, but make sure you're working with the right people. Over here at Momentum Realty, we'd love to set you up with an agent that can help you with the sale or the purchase of a property. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns about today's podcast, feel free to PM me, DM me, whatever works best for your communications. I thank you for listening to the podcast. Make sure to follow us, and I look forward to talking to you next week.